Hey there guys, what's up? It's Autobot Mike 18 here, back with yet again another TV episode review. Guys, we are coming close to the end of The Wire, because, no, I'm not reviewing The Wire in this video, because we are in the middle of, True Detective, or, the start to the end of True Detective. We got 2 episodes left, and I know it's amazing how fast this entire season went, really. I don't know, maybe it's just the summer's going by fast, I don't know. But we only have 2 more episodes left of True Detective because the 6th episode aired tonight. That's right, in this video, because in this video I'm going to be reviewing Season 2, Episode 6, and the title is Church in Ruins. I'm going to discuss all things tonight's episode, spoiler-heavy review, guys. So yeah, I was looking forward to tonight's episode of True Detective. Again, like last season, even though I think last season got really good. Right around episode 3, I think, is when that season really picked up for me. And then, of course, the end of the season was strong for me. A lot of people felt that it was actually kind of weak, and they were a little disappointed with, like, the last 2 episodes, but I loved them. But anyway, not talking about Season 1 here. Again, Season 2 has been hit or miss for most people. I think leaning more towards miss. I think a lot of people have been really upset with it. If you guys saw my review for last week's episode, Other Lives, I thought it was the best episode of the season by far, and I was really hoping that tonight's episode would go up. And I think one of the big things I was looking forward to was that confrontation between Frank and Ray, after we find out that the man that Frank gave to Ray, his identity and everything, all those years back when they first met at the bar, was the man that Frank thought raped his wife, raped Ray's wife. And Ray took this guy's life, killed him. And then we find out last week that, no, that was all a lie. And they killed the wrong guy, because the actual rapist is in jail right now. So Ray was, like, self-destructing last week, took his anger out on poor Dr. Pittler, and because of that, I was really anticipating this week's episode. I was also looking forward to the whole thing that was going on with Annie and her infiltrating the party. I thought that looked really good in the promo. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to break it down like I've always been, guys. I think every single episode I've done this. I'll break it down by characters, by different characters. I'll start off again with Frank, because why not? I always start off with Frank. And I gotta say this much. The first half of the episode, in general, not just for Frank's story, in general, was kind of lackluster for me. I felt there was a scene that could have been cut entirely out of it, and there was actually a scene with Frank in it, which I'll discuss now. Yeah, I think the second half of this episode was near perfect, in my opinion. The tension was there, the characters were in peril. I bought into it. But getting into Frank for tonight's episode, I'll talk more about the confrontation between him and Ray a little bit later on, when I get into what happened with Ray, because this episode, I think, really focused on Ray and his kid for the first half, or the good first half of it. And I think Paul was even, like, I'm not even going to, like, discuss what happened to Paul this week, because we really didn't get much with him. He just, is looking into the leads of the diamonds, trying to look around. We got a scene of him talking to this guy who was in this, I think he owned a jewelry store or something, and there was a robbery 92, and the diamonds were stolen or whatever. And these are the same diamonds that were in Caspere's house, the diamonds that Dixon, went to the pawn shop looking for, or something, as was revealed in last week's episode. So that's really all that happened with Paul tonight, and then a lot happened with Annie in the latter half of the episode, so I'll get into that. But getting back to Frank, what really, apart from the opening scene, I'm going to skip that. What I was really just confused about, and I think is quite possibly the most unnecessary scene in this entire episode, and it's what really brought the episode down for me, is the whole moment where they go to the house to, what do you call it? He goes to the house to talk to the wife of one of his dead employees. He was like working security for Frank or whatever. The guy's name is Stan. He was killed in like the 3rd episode or so. I remember they found his body like in the ditch. And not only did I not care when Stan died, because he wasn't developed at all. He had hardly any screen time. I can't even remember a lot of lines that his character was given. So I gave 0 shits when they found his body. I was like, okay, this is bad for Frank, alright, but I don't know this guy. I think he's had, 5 minutes of screen time before we see his dead body. And they're just milking this scene out so much where they're talking to the wife, and then the Blake guy, the shady Blake guy that Vince Vaughn's looking into, he's having Ray look into, is apparently went by the house after Stan died and asked the wife all these questions, yada yada. So yes, we get the point that Blake is rogue, and he's, not... He's doing things on the side. He's involved in the parties that are going on. We later see him later on in the episode. But then we have the moment where Frank goes to Stan's kid, and I understand where they were going with that, because he's like trying to comfort this kid, and in a sense he feels like this kid is sort of like what he was when he was younger, because now this kid doesn't have a father. He never really had a father, or his father was an asshole, whatever. And I get what they were trying to say with it, but it didn't go anywhere for me. It went nowhere, and it could have been cut entirely out of this episode. And that was the first half, and Frank had really nothing to do other than that whole conversation with Ray. Then we get into the second half of the episode, and that's where things really picked up for me with what was going on with Frank. Because he's trying to investigate the one of the girls who was being pimped off by that guy, Ledo Amarillo, who was the guy who was killed in the shootout, the guy they were after, the cops, Ray, Annie, and Paul. And they never found her. She was never brought in for questioning. They couldn't find her, whatever. She was one of his girls, and she ended up pawning off the jewelry. So Frank is going to the ends of the earth. There is a really kick-ass torture scene where I finally, for once, felt Vince Vaughn a little bit more threatening, because one, I did not expect him to actually pull off a torture scene, because he hasn't really done anything threatening the whole entire rest of the season. This was where he finally stepped up and is he's having his men drill these spear things into this guy they're torturing for information, who knew this Ledo guy. So they're trying to get a lead on where this Irina Ruffalo girl is, Rolfo girl, whatever her last name is. Her name's Irina. And this is the girl that was being pimped off by Ledo. And he gives some information of a house, and Frank and his guys raid it, and things were getting exciting. And then these 2 Mexican men come home, and it was the same 2 men that had visited Frank at one of his clubs, I think wanting to get involved in selling their drugs throughout his clubs. And I think he turned down or something. I don't remember. I think that was in the last episode. It wasn't an important... the plot point didn't faze me, which is why I didn't even bring it up in my review last week. I didn't even think the men were going to come back. I didn't think it was any big deal. But it's their house they're raiding, and he sits down with them, and he's telling them he needs to find this Irina girl, and they say that they will... they will get her number, get her on the phone with him or whatever. They'll get in contact with her. They'll find her if he lets them sell their drugs, their whatever they have in his clubs. And he agrees. They set terms, blah, blah, blah. And I thought that was interesting. Then later on in the episode, she calls him on the phone, and this Irina girl, and she tells him that she was told by a white cop, because she believed that this person who told her to try to pawn these diamonds was a cop. Now, as soon as she said cop, I immediately looked to Taylor Kitsch, because she was describing his features, and I was like, wait a second, is Paul in on this in some way? But I said, no way. But apparently she was working with the police, because Frank is desperate to meet with this girl. And they agree to meet at a site. We cut to Annie and the party, which I'll get into. But then we cut back to Frank and his men going to this like dark site, and that's where they're supposed to meet this Serena girl. But they find her dead body, and then the two Mexican guys in their whole group come out, and he's just disgusted that they killed her because he wanted to talk with her and he wanted her to look at some pictures of some cops because he needs to know who was involved in Caspere's murder. This is ultimately going to get him his money back. Or find out where it is, who took it, whatever. And they just tell him that she, was working with cops, obviously, and they kind of just blow that off. So that's the end of that storyline. I think it had a weak ending, but I think it was rising, because when she got on the phone with him and told him it was a cop who told her to do it, I got really intrigued. And maybe it's not one of our two leads. Maybe it's not either Ray or Paul. I don't know, maybe I just fanboyed out and I was like, ooh, what if they go for the cliche twist ending where one of these cops is actually murdered Caspere and they're working the case, blah, blah, blah. But I don't think they're going to go for that. That just was some dumb thought that came over my head again. But I thought the tension was there for Frank's episode this time. I felt he was a lot more threatening for Frank's part of the story. He was a lot more threatening and I bought it overall. So props to him, finally, for this episode. I think this was one of his more intriguing storylines, and it worked for me. Let's get into Ray's moment, because Colin Farrell is just incredible in this show. Let's just make sure that doesn't go unsaid for this review. Always impressed me from his first episode on, and he was incredible in tonight's episode. Absolutely perfect. Now, he's dealing with a lot of crap now. Now I'm going to get into the whole scene where he's with Frank. I love that entire scene. They keep cutting to the shot of the gun, and Ray's holding the gun under the table. He's aiming it right at Frank. That's great. I mean, the tension was there. The scene was a little weak, in my opinion, though. I mean, they really built it up in the promo for last week's episode. I really feel that it could have been a bit stronger. I feel it was a little bit slow moving, personally. And we obviously knew that either one of them weren't going to shoot at each other, but you can see, like, the furiosity. Is that a word? I don't know. You can see just how furious Ray is, and he is holding it in. He does not want to let that all out. And because he genuinely, at the start, when he sits down with Frank in Frank's house, he genuinely thinks that Frank just gave him that guy's name and used him just so, he could get Ray on his side, just so he can get an inside man with the police, so he can find out, what their moves are, what they're planning for his own benefit. And I really like how Ray believes this. Now, Frank obviously tells him otherwise when they finally get down to it. I love from the beginning, they're just staring at each other, and he's like, did you really come all this... And Frank's like, did you really come all this way over here just to stare at me, just to look at me, or however he said it was funny. So yeah, they're in the stare-off. You get the idea. Ray thinks that Frank just used him, and whether or not Frank is telling the truth, because Frank says, I got the name of the guy you killed, thinking it was the rapist, from one of my guys, and I don't, I'm not in contact with him anymore, blah, blah, blah. And Ray wants this guy. I mean, he's pissed, okay? He's beyond pissed. He wants to know who gave Frank the wrong information, if Frank is, telling what could be the truth or what could not be. I think it would be really personally great, and I'm not saying that Frank didn't use Ray. I think it would be great if he did. I think that would be a great twist, because now Ray and Frank are more coming to terms after this little discussion they have at the breakfast table, because Ray now is thinking, alright, maybe he really didn't know who this guy was, or didn't know that he was using me, or maybe his guy did give him the wrong name, because I really think Ray's thinking that now, because not only does he not shoot Frank and he's got his hand right on the trigger, and that was great, but I mean, maybe he's believing him, maybe he's buying what Frank's saying, I don't know, but I think it would be great if in the last episode or so, Frank tells Ray that I don't know, towards the very near end, because obviously Ray's going to go nuts when he hears this. But if Frank tells Ray, I did use you, okay, I knew that this was the wrong guy. I gave him to you anyway. I needed you on my side. Maybe they couldn't find the actual guy. And maybe Frank knew all about this. I think that would be great. It would give Vince Vaughn's character something to, it would give him an extra layer, you know what I mean? It would make him that sinister gangster who uses people for his own benefit. And I think that's what Vince Vaughn's character needs to be at this point. And I'm really hoping that's the truth. It's fine if they're, if Frank is telling the truth and he really didn't know that this guy wasn't Ray's guy. But I would like it if it was that way. So, their conversation ends, and Frank agrees to look up this guy and give him to Ray, his contact information, or whatever, his information. So Ray's obviously going to want to kill this guy, clearly. In exchange for Frank and Ray both looking for the hard drive. And I also didn't mention this last episode. There's this hard drive, I think it was the same hard drive that was in that house that Ray got shot in back in episode 2. That's that missing hard drive. They got to find it. There may be important files on it. This is some guy, manager of a hotel, I think. I don't know, some building. He went to go see him last episode. Told Frank, listen, you got to find me this hard drive. So now the two of them are going to work on that, and in turn, Frank is going to give Ray this information that he wants and is craving. And after that, Frank tells Ray about Ray tells Frank about Blake and what he's been up to, and that's basically the end of that. But I really like what's going on here, because I could see really interesting things stemming out of this. What if Frank? They find this hard drive. Frank does not give him the name of the guy who tipped him off, or what if he gives him the name of any guy, just so Ray can go kill him and get Ray off his back? And what if he admits to Ray the truth, that he really did know about all this? I think that would be great. That's what I want to see happen personally. So Ray is just like self-destruct in this episode. He goes to see the guy who is currently in jail for the rape of his ex-wife. And, oh my god, that is such a good dark moment. Colin Farrell is dynamite in that scene. Because they're on both sides of the glass. They're talking to each other on the phone. And he tells him, you should know me. He tells the rapist, you should know me. You should look into my eyes, blah, blah, blah. He tells him, was there a woman that you may or may not have been one of your victims? And he describes what his wife looked like. He describes the exact date. It was like 11 years ago or something. Chad's age. I'm guessing Chad is 11. Looks way older than that, but looks like he's 13, whatever. So that scene is great. But the kicker of that scene is when he leans into like closer to the glass when he's on the phone, Ray, and he's in the darkness. He's in the light throughout the most of it, and he's not threatening him or anything, but when he leans in, his face goes dark, and it's so symbolic of what he is saying to him at this moment. He is just saying the utmost. He's like, I'm gonna cut your prick off. I am going to tear you apart. And it is so badass, and the guy's left like near speechless. So that was another great moment. And then I think the turning point for Ray's decision to call his ex-wife in this episode and say, "Listen, I'm gonna step out. I'm not gonna contest for custody. I'm not gonna get involved. You can, I'll stop seeing Chad. I'll disappear from his life forever. I just don't want you to give a paternity. I just don't want the paternity test. Rather, I don't want the paternity test results to be found out by Chad. He doesn't want Chad to know, because he's pretty damn sure that the rapist is Chad's father, and he doesn't want Chad to know this. But the turning point is when he goes to visit with Chad. Chad clearly wants nothing to do with him, and that is, or not nothing to do with him. He doesn't love his father like he probably did in the past because of how Ray has spiraled out of control here or there. And it's so prevalently clear, and they got the social worker watching them writing down shit, and they can't agree on what to watch on TV, and they can't agree, they just have different interests. he wants to build a model airplane or whatever with his son. His son has no interest in that. And when he tells him that he loves him, the son just says, okay. And then Ray just goes cold. And that is such a great moment, in my opinion. And what follows after, where Ray goes out of control, goes back to his apartment, and that whole montage of him just doing cocaine and getting drunk, smoking. Not only was that incredibly well acted by Colin Farrell, but I think that was another weak scene. I understand this effect that it's having on him. I mean, this is his son, and his son doesn't love him. And I can understand how hard that must be for him as a parent. But, I mean, I just felt that was also unnecessary. Just had no place there, really. But, so that's everything that happened with Ray. Ray's storyline, though, I mean, it got me. Like, it was fierce. It was, and he was amazing. He had so much range in this episode, Colin Farrell. He's great. But, what I want to get into now is the second half of the episode, which is where the majority of Annie's storyline really lies in. And she's getting ready to infiltrate one of those parties that she's discovered after seeing all those photographs of Caspere and Chisani and whatever with all these different girls. And she's on the side also still looking for that missing girl, Vera, who she started looking for in the first episode. So she's getting ready for the party. Her sister has gotten her an invite, and Annie is going to go in as her sister using her name. She dyes her hair. In one scene, she is knifing this like wooden statue dummy, preparing to go in for the party. And I'm like, I want to see her use this knife. That is going to be so damn awesome. And I really just want to see her abilities like lashed out. And Paul and Ray give Annie a transponder that she can put like in her shoe or whatever, so they can tail the party bus that's taking her and all these girls to this party, which is like in the middle of nowhere. And they do just that. Paul and Ray tail the bus. They get there. Annie gets inside. Before she does, I think, or when she does get inside, they have to give all these girls like this drug where you got to spray it in their mouth. It's called Molly, I think. And that was like really, because obviously Annie didn't expect that, and her sister never brought it up, I don't think. So she's immediately freaked out when she's lined up with all these girls, and they're just spraying the shit in the mouth. Then they bring the guys in, all the girls are mingling and whatnot. Meanwhile, Ray and Paul are both on the outside. They're like in black uniforms, like they're completely undercover here, and they're taking out guards and whatnot. And Paul listens in on a window, and these two guys, who I don't remember seeing, if we have seen them before in the show, I don't remember them. They're talking about things going on with investments and shareholders and whatnot, and they mention Frank's last name. So one of the guys is like, like what we did with Simon, right? So, yeah, obviously, these men at this party, they all have something to do with, or maybe a few in particular have something to do with this Caspere murder and this whole thing with Frank's money and whatnot. But Paul sneaks in and steals like a whole bunch of documents that has a bunch of signatures on it or whatever. But then, right around when this is all happening, Annie's in the party and she's starting to lose her mind. The room's not starting to spin, but everything's getting blurry. This drug is having very negative effects on her, and she's seeing all these girls talking to guys, and then this one older guy swoops her up and is like, come on, let's go upstairs, blah, blah, blah. She goes upstairs with him, and we see the horror, and I mean, like, not horror like what happened with when we saw the real murderer in the first season, and we saw what his house looked like that, like an episode of Storage Wars or whatever, where all the clutter's all over the place and how he's having incestual relations with his own sister. Like, that was horrific. But I think the horrific moment of this season is how we see these men are taking advantage of these girls, because there are these men having sex with women all over the second floor of this building where this party's being held. All over the place, like on seats, like they're having like threesomes. Girls are standing around naked, and it is really horrific for Annie to see. Girls are making out with other girls, and it's just a horrible sight. That mixed with the drugs, mixed with this face or this image of this man she keeps seeing, who keeps talking to her. there was a guy with extremely long black hair who was from her childhood, and she starts flashing back. And these are the most intriguing, because we still need more of a backstory on Annie. You know, there's something there. You know, yes, she had a difficult relationship with her father, and then her sister and her strayed, but they're getting back on terms now. But we need, like, something happened to her as a kid. Why do I still want to go back to that scene back early on in the season when she was watching pornography, or more specifically, I think lesbian pornography. I don't remember. Early on in the season, like, I think she was in a hotel or whatever, and I won't forget that. And I really want to know where she's going with that. What I think, she's seeing the images of this guy, and he takes her into, like, this, like, mobile RV thing, and he closes the door, and she stops having these flashbacks. So it's got me really intrigued. What happened in her past? Who was that guy she kept seeing? I think it's someone who sexually assaulted her. I don't know. Maybe David Morris isn't her real father. Maybe that was her real father. I don't know. Maybe David Morris is her stepfather. Maybe that was an uncle or something. I don't know. Maybe it was just a friend of her father's, and he took advantage of her. And maybe that's, like, left a negative impact on her. I mean, maybe that's why the guy was feeling uncomfortable in the first episode when she wanted to sleep with him, and she was doing things that were making him feel uncomfortable. Maybe she only does uncomfortable things now in the bedroom because of that sexual experience that, you know, she probably had when she was younger. We see her in her form now, like Rachel McAdams' age now, but the character, I'm assuming, was younger when this happened. But I really don't know. I'm really curious and intrigued to see where that's going. But she goes to the bathroom to hack up these drugs, and she sees Vera, the missing girl, who she's been looking for. She gets her out of the bathroom. They're both half disoriented. She's got to get her out of the house. This one guy approaches them, and she whips out one of her knives, and finds a knife, and she does that thing where she, like, slashes his entire stomach. You know, I'm gonna use my pen. Cuts him up, and he's in the middle of strangling her, but he's bleeding profusely. He bleeds out and drops dead. And I was so happy to finally see Annie use those knives. So her and Vera manage to get out of there. They run right into Paul, which I thought was a little coincidental, but whatever. And Paul gets them out of there. Bodyguards are chasing them. Ray meets them with the car. They get out. They escape with Vera, their missing person, and thus the end of the episode. But nevertheless, guys, I was intrigued with tonight's episode overall. I think the show is still keeping me on edge. It's coming closer and closer down the wire, and you can see it happening. Although the first half of this episode was filled with a lot of scenes I felt were very unnecessary, I think the second half of this episode really picked up. I think Colin Farrell shined in this episode. The tension was there with all storylines, not only Annie in the party, and that whole scene left me riveted, but even what was going on with Frank was just getting me into it. Ray's whole dilemma this entire night was great. In the end, this is one of the better episodes of the season. I don't think it's better than last week's episode because of that brilliant twist, but things definitely picked up. The scenes, the party were very well shot. The POVs and all that, they look great. I'm going to go high, not that high, but I'm going to go 9 out of 10 for tonight's episode. Probably my second favorite episode of the season. Not sure. But there you have it, guys. I think, even though, like I said, I bitched about the first half of the episode, I think the second half really picked up for me, and that's why I went as high with my rating as I did. So there you have it, guys. Those are my thoughts on True Detective Season 2, Episode 6, Church in Ruins. Now, I want you guys to leave me predictions down below. Start leaving me predictions. I left you a couple predictions throughout the video. Let me know what you guys think is going to happen in the next two episodes, basically. And I thank you guys very much for watching. I will see you in my next video. Bye.